Hey, what's going on, Summoners? My name is Nathaning, and we're going to be walking you guys through our beginner's guide to the ADC in Season 12. ADC may have some of the least champions in the game, but they can be incredibly powerful. Whether you've been playing ADC for years now or just simply picked it up in the preseason, we're hoping to really prepare you for the new future within the AD role. Nonetheless, let's hop right into the video. Before we can dive in depth on how to play the AD carry, it's really best if we first understand the purpose of the role. In its simplest form, AD carry is your team's physical damage dealer. Of course, there are a few exceptions with champions like Ziggs and Karthus in the bot lane, but more often than not, ADCs will be dealing the highest amount of damage in the game. Between their high AD scalings and long range, it can be difficult to match the strength of a power-spiked marksman. However, with this amount of power comes a ton of responsibility, pressure, and key strategies. We'll be covering that a little bit later on in the video. Before we dive into the role of the ADC, don't forget to check us out at ProGuides.com. We're going to go ahead and view our great catalog of challenger coaches that can personally create a walkthrough to your dream rank. You got a busy schedule, but we've got you covered. Our trained roster of coaches are here 24/7 to help you reach your goal, whatever that may be. So what are you waiting for? Check it out. Regardless, let's get back into the video and continue with our journey to the ADC in Season 12. With our previous points in mind, AD carry needs to have weaknesses to ensure that they don't just run rampant with power. This is portrayed by their low health, lack of defensive items, need for gold, and low mobility. The weakness of these carries can vary from marksman to marksman, but overall, your strength makes you a target. It's important to keep in mind that as an AD carry, you're also the team's primary objective taker. You're often the one that can siege turrets and shred through Baron, which only makes you more important. The power that you hold as your primary team's damage per second puts a big marker on your head, and this is why the enemy team will stop at nothing to ensure that you're dead. Whether it's a tank seeing you or an assassin coming in from the sidelines, you've got to be prepared for the worst. If you watched Arcane recently, then trust us when we say everybody wants to be your enemy. Now that we understand our role as an AD carry, we've got to take a look at the different playstyles. While different AD carry playstyles may shift your role as a marksman a bit, the overall goal remains the same: do a lot of damage. These playstyles heavily influence what champions that you'll be playing so that you can best execute your role. Of course, you can always force your own personal playstyle on any champion, but we wouldn't recommend it. We'll be covering each playstyle and how they spike and what their goals are, a few of their weaknesses, and what champions fall into the category. Nonetheless, let's dive right on in. Starting us off strong, we've got the styles that perfectly describes ADCs and how they were meant to be played. When it comes to hyper carries, they are what people often think of when they think of late game marksmen. Hyper carries deal insane amounts of damage, but it takes them a long time to get powered up. Between their need for levels and gold, games need to drag on for them to reach their true potential. Now, you may be asking why every ADC isn't technically a hyper carry in the late game. Well, that's because in general, hyper carries are immobile, crit scaling marksmen that use their range advantages to melt through the enemy. This means that they have high AD and or crit scaling on their abilities compared to other carries. Sure, any fed AD carry may deal a high amount of damage, but these champions can thrive in times when they're not even ahead. Speaking of which, when it comes to positioning, these carries are extremely vulnerable. They often lack any type of mobility, which means that assassins can get to them quite often. With this in mind, as a hyper carry, it's your job to make it as hard as possible for them to do so. Keep in mind that you're your team's primary DPS, which means staying alive is extremely a high priority. I mean, you can't deal damage if you're dead, right? With this playstyle, you should always look to hit targets closest to your team. This is often done in a front-to-back playstyle, in which you can constantly sit behind your tank and or peeling champions. It can be very difficult to build this habit at first, but with time and practice, anything is possible. When it comes to power spikes, this playstyle generally remains the same. For many of them, they spike at Infinity Edge, which is usually around 3 items. As we said before, they can take quite a little bit to ramp up in power. While this may seem like a problem, it also means that they snowball much harder than other champions. If a hyper carry can reach the power spike faster than usual, they can easily carry games. So if you're looking for a true 1v9 champion with the classic DPS playstyle, then hyper carries might be for you. This category includes champions like Aphelios, Jinx, Kog'Maw, Twitch, and Vayne. Vayne is a little bit of an exception to the standard hyper carry rules due to her short range and high mobility. That being said, her purpose and playstyle remains the same, and her early game isn't that bad either. Some of you may find the idea of scaling all game pretty boring. This is where our early to mid game carries shine. These types of carries look to use their high damage and build up an early lead for the team. With it, they can siege multiple turrets and easily claim objectives like Dragon. While they may not deal as much damage as a hyper carry in the late game, they still pack quite a punch. Their naturally high damage lets them pressure their lane and look for skirmishes with their jungler. On top of this, they aren't as reliant on items and tend to be a little bit more mobile. However, their trade-off is that they need to gain an early lead. With this playstyle, if you're even in golds and levels with the enemy, then you've lost. Now, this doesn't mean that you need to coin flip and force every single fight. Instead, it means that your goal is now changed and you need to approach it differently. Rather than playing up to scale with your 3-item power spike, you should instead be looking to pressure the enemy. This is often done through kills, trades, and turret platings. Early to mid-game carries tend to spike at 1 to 2 items, which is a massive advantage. While they may lack long-range attacks, they often make up for it thanks to their mobility and base damage. It may seem that playing these types of champions are far easier than a hyper carry, but that's simply not true. Both playstyles can be difficult to execute, and they both want completely opposite things. Be sure to pick the one that best suits you, and don't worry, these champions can also carry games just as hard as hyper carries with a bit of practice. With the pressure that you can create, your allies slowly gain a lead, and eventually, you can end the game. We're briefly going to dive one layer deeper into this category. All early to mid-game carries share the same goal of gaining the advantage on their laner. However, this is often done in different ways depending on the champions. For some of these carries, they rely on a lead through HP advantages and turret plating. Champions like Caitlyn, Misfortune, and Sivir all best fit this description. Not only do they spike incredibly fast, but they all offer a great trading pattern and wave clear. These champions want to take short trades and get as many plates as possible. Just be sure that you don't mindlessly push and end up getting the enemy jungler ahead. Next up, we've got our champions that prefer bursting down the enemy. These carries rely on gaining their lead through sheer damage and kills. With this goal in mind, they often prefer to dive on the enemy whenever possible. If they're able to gain a lead early on, they can easily translate it to the mid-game. This playstyle may seem volatile, but with enough wave management and focus, it's not as RNG based as you think. This includes champions like Samara, Lucian, and Draven. While it's good to get early kills, make sure you don't force so hard that you fall behind. There are a few champions that simply just don't fall into any of these subcategories of early to mid-game carries. This includes a few mages and champions like Yasuo that are often spotted in the bot lane. However, our main focus here is going to be on Ezreal. Ezreal is notorious for his mid-game power spike, but he's a lot like me in high school. He's just in a very awkward spot. His early game is powerful for a bit, but he's also looking to scale into the mid-game. This essentially makes him one of the few marksmen that is looking to scale exclusively for the mid-game. With this trade-off though, he is easily one of the strongest champions in the game at his 2-item spike. Now before we continue on with the video, don't think for a second that we have forgotten about everybody's favorite ProGuides tradition. For our question of the day today, we want to ask you guys, what was your first role when you first started playing? Be sure to let us know your answers in the comments down below. Mine was actually jungle. In fact, I actually wanted to play jungle because Nocturne looks really cool, and that's the reason I started playing League of Legends, and now I main ADC and mid. Anyway, let's get back into the video and dive right into our final playstyle. Last but not least, we've got our utility carries. This playstyle is great for those of you who want an easy and reliable champion in the bot lane. They feature a great mix of these previous playstyles, but also being a support for their team. Think of them as somebody that helps your team deal damage rather than being the primary damage. Of course, they still hurt quite a bit, and there are a few exceptions, but that's where they generally fit. Jhin is that exception. He hits like a truck, and sometimes he could be a lane bully as well. There's not much to talk about with the utility carries, since they're all fairly unique in their own aspects. Whether you pick Ashe for her lane pressure, Jhin for his late game scaling, or Varus for the balance of both, they all share one thing in common. They've all got amazing utility in their kits that can support their allies. Ashe can slow and give vision, Jhin has long range root and traps, Varus has CC, etc. This makes it a little bit difficult to make a general rule about their strengths and weaknesses, but they can be best described as immobile carries with CC abilities. If you're looking for a balanced pool with some versatility, then give them a try. Before we end off the video, we've got to cover our final important point for ADC. If you're truly looking to succeed in this role, then there's one crucial thing that all ADCs share. This is the one and most important thing that you need to get good at. Summoners, we're talking about CSing. CSing stands for creep score, and it's an important aspect for many roles, but due to this price of marksman items, it's the most important for AD carries. It can be argued that some AD carries need more CS than others, but regardless, you should always look to CS. This is a skill that's worth spending hours of practicing and focusing on. Having the ability to maintain good CS naturally does a few things for you. You will die less since you won't go for pointless fights and will instead farm. You will spike faster. CS is worth a ton of gold and it's more reliable. You create good habits for futures and other roles. I mean, essentially CSing is just taking minions and last hitting them. You should always aim for 10 CS or minions per minute as an ADC. Now there's a lot of people that misunderstand that statement. We're not saying that you always have to hit 10 per minute, we're saying that it should be your goal every single time. If you're reaching 6 and are satisfied, then you won't look to improve. Set yourself up for success and look for 10 even if it's not possible. Take your time learning the CS, and as an ADC, the difference in power between somebody with 120 CS and 140 can be game changing. Here's a general rule, 15 CS is generally worth 1 kill in gold. That sums up our video for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to join our ProGuides family at ProGuides.com. We offer exclusive giveaways and classes that you won't catch anywhere else, so stay tuned and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. If you want to see me more outside of ProGuides, go ahead and check out my Twitch at twitch.tv/Nathan_ing. I would love to see you guys there, and if not, no worries. We'll see you guys in the next video, and don't forget, stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.